and welcome to another edition of Selectmen's Roundtable. I am Beth Cassavant, and I am joined by my colleagues, John LeBeau, John Samia, and Mo DiPaolo, and we are here to just talk about some of the things that have been going on in town and some of the issues that we're dealing with as a board. So we can just open it up, and we have a few different topics that we wanted to cover. But I did want to start by saying that we are going to be having our third office hours coming up a week from tonight on Monday, January 27th. We've decided that we want to rotate throughout the town, and so we've been to the library and the senior center, and so we are going to be in the community room at the Shrewsbury Tower, which is on North Quinsigamond Ave, for those that may not know. And you don't have to be a resident of the tower. Anybody is welcome to attend, and we'll be there from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And it's random who you'll get, depends on schedules, likely not to be all 5 of us, but at least one and possibly more. So we look forward to any residents who'd like to come and chat with us for a few minutes just that night. So I definitely want to start with that. And we were going to talk about some staffing changes. If I know you sat in on the Council on Aging Director search, Mo, if you want to talk a little bit about it.
Yes, Holly Luck, is how she pronounces her last name, started as a COA director a week ago Monday, and she was here for 2 days and sat in on her first Council on Aging meeting, which I watched and was interesting. She may have said, "Wow, it's what I get into," but I've talked to her at the Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services Harry Cutting Awards, and we went around and introduced her to a bunch of people that work for the town and the community, and she's very excited. She's got some really good ideas. She comes to us as the COA director in Berlin, which was a part-time job, and the Parks and Recreation director at the town of Princeton, again another part-time job, but she has a lot of experience dealing with seniors, particularly seniors with dementia and issues like that. So, but she's got great ideas. She's looking to get out into the community. She's looking for a lot of involvement by more involvement with the volunteers, and it's exciting to have her there. She's got some good ideas. So.
As one of the ideas that stuck out to me when I was watching that meeting was she talked about having the senior center open one night a week or one weekend day a month, and just trying to find a way to change the hours a little bit to appeal to more people who maybe are working during the day but still want to take advantage of something at night.
Right.
I thought that was a really interesting idea.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. Take a little bit to settle down and get to understand, get the lay of the land. But sitting in on the interviews, I was really excited about what she had to say, and I'm glad that it turned out that we all recommended her. Kevin talked to her again and offered her the job, and she said yes. So it's exciting. Big change.
It is. And then we'll be having another big change coming up in April when Ellen Dolan retires as the director of the library, and the library board of trustees just last week had a special meeting to name Priya Rantham as the new library director. And Priya, as we know, is the assistant library director currently, and I think that she is going to be a wonderful, never replacement because Ellen cannot be replaced, but a wonderful director for our library.
I've heard a lot of good things about her, and it's nice that we had somebody in-house who was able to rise into that position. And she was there from building the new building and
started as a volunteer, if I recall.
I think
yes,
so.
I think you're right.
But yeah, another exciting time. It'll be a little sad to see Ellen go because she's such a professional. But Priya, blazed her own trail, so she's got a good foundation to start on. Change is always, it can be exciting. So
yeah, in this case, continuity will be important too, with the strategic planning that the library does, but given the importance that the library plays in the development of the town center that we've heard a lot about, combining the new with the old. I think it's also, this is a unique situation of combining someone that's rose up through the ranks, but also giving her separate perspective on what the library will do going forward. So it's exciting times as we develop in different positions in the community.
Definitely. Yeah. So we talked about our staff changes. We wanted to give a quick update on the flushing that's been going on in town.
Hydrant
have you-
flushing,
have you-
let's try to be a little more specific.
Hydrant flushing. Have you tracked down any more workers out in the field, Mo, lately to see how
actually,
their progress has been?
The other day when they said they were out, I went up in the Prospect Street area
I
and
knew it.
I
And
couldn't.
it's my neck of the woods.
Well,
I'm chasing them.
I left my morning coffee and figured I'd see. I was curious to see what they were saying about what was coming out of the pipes, but I couldn't find them and I couldn't remember all the roads that they were on. I passed on it, but because the weather's been warm, they've actually got to do a lot more flushing than they thought they were going to be able to do at this time of the year. So every time the temperature gets high enough into the 30s, if the contract, the Hydrotech, is available, they know it's going to be warm. They put the notice out that they're going to do it, and they get out there. So it's good. The faster we get it done, the better.
Absolutely.
So the program's been working well. I talked to somebody who had tremendous problems at his house over a long period of time, and a couple of weeks ago he put in a small sediment filter, and he had to change it a lot. A couple of weeks ago he said he changed it, and he said the filter was a little off color, but there was no grit in it. So I took that to be a very good sign. So it'll keep going. It's probably going to begin in earnest in April, but as the weather's good, they're going to do it. So it's working out good.
I even saw them out on a day that was rather cold, marking places in the road where they needed to
Well,
access valves.
yeah. What they're doing is they're going out ahead of when they're going to flush to see if the valves all work, because there was concern that up to 20% of the valves could be frozen because they hadn't been exercised. But so far, from what Mr. Mizikar said, they've been able to operate every one of them, which is great, because that is a significant cost. You have to excavate and put a new gate valve in. So it's working out well.
That's good.
Working out well.
I think there's been good communication too from the water superintendent, Dan Raleigh, sends out very timely updates. I know they've been in my neighborhood, and so I'm sure you're also getting them, so we live not far from each other. Just a lot of emails and phone calls regarding the truck's going to be in the area. You might have some discolored water, but yeah, I haven't had a problem, so
No,
it's been
it's been going well.
uneventful.
I should add, I went on one of those very desirable sewer pump station tours last week with the sewer commission. We visited about 5 pump stations, the 3 big ones, and they were explaining what work needs to be done. And I was not amazed that I knew there was work that would need to be done. They were all getting old, but I didn't realize how deep all those were. They're like 28 feet down. They're really deep. But yeah, they're all starting to age, and we've got a replacement program that we've been doing. These might have to move up on the list a little bit because they're critical, but the people in the sewer department, they're on top of everything. They can tell you, the history on these different pump stations. It's amazing. They really know what's going on. But it actually, Beth, it didn't smell healthy at all.
Just totally scared me off.
It was, well, actually everybody was pleasantly surprised. We didn't get the odor we expected.
Well, when the
but
warning email says you might need to
Change
change
your
your
clothes.
clothes and take a shower, and everybody who knows me knows that I'm terrified of germs. So I thought
We were gonna get you a white tie.
I was going to wear a
hazmat
mask,
suit.
and then I was like, no, I'm going to need more than a mask for this. So I figured I'd just let the chairman go and
Yeah.
tell me about it
And
later.
it was a great time to do it. I think it was 18 degrees outside.
Oh,
It
so
was,
maybe that's why it wasn't so smelly.
Well, we
Should we go in
didn't.
the middle of the summer next time?
We didn't spend a whole lot of time inside the things. We spent more than look and then came out and talked. But it really wasn't which is a good thing, because if we were smelling the odor, then that meant the neighbors would be smelling the odor, and they weren't, so.
And we have, what, 39 pump stations?
I think so. But these, the three big ones are Harvey Place, Rolfe Ave, and Maple Ave. I mean, they are big. They don't look at the building, it looks small, but they're big. And then they showed us what a new pump station looks like, or a rebuilt one, and they showed us what the older, small ones look like, so we could get some perspective. But it's always interesting, because when they talk about these things at the public works workshops, or they talk about them at the finance committee, it makes it a little bit easier to relate to what they're saying. So anyways, it's just one of those things. It's what you can do when you're retired, I guess.
Go look at suicide
Yeah.
stations.
My friend, what do you do when you're retired? Yeah, so we go look at substations. But anyways, I digress.
Great. No, it's really good. Good to hear. We had some presentations at our last meeting about, Mr. Mizikar gave us a mid-year update talking about where we are in the budget, how much has been expended, and some of the interesting, noteworthy items that have been taking place. One of the points that I thought was interesting was that in the human resources, that there have been 32 recruitments, 24 hires, 9 full-time, 3 permanent part-time, and 12 temporary part-time. That's a lot of staff moving around. And I know we talked about how there would be change and transition coming up as like department heads that have been with us for a long time near retirement. It is incredible just in the short time that Kevin's been with us, how many people have shifted and moved. And I think I heard him say on an Ask the Manager that he's hired more department heads in his 3 years than Dan Morgado ever had to do in his 20.
Right.
And I think that's such an interesting statistic.
Well, one of the hallmarks of our community is that our employees stay, and the department heads stay. They're very stable. We have the only place I can really remember that somebody left who wasn't retiring was treasurer's office, because there were different opportunities for the treasurer sometimes. But it's very, very stable. So Dan was in a time frame where a lot of people weren't ready to move, and as time went on, people said, "Okay, it's time to move on." Some people, when this is natural moving of, it might be a different organization. Sometimes some of we call them municipal employees, might have, they stayed in the building, but they went to the school department.
Or Selco.
But it's still a pretty stable group.
And the additional training that's going on now to understand, to keep the voluntary turnover ratios low. You want to, obviously we're investing in our people, but other training highlights that we saw from executive development, goal development, customer service training, throughout all the different departments, from DPW to the town manager's office, and the senior leadership team. Also, mental health first aid is being trained throughout the municipal departments as well, understanding the needs, social and emotional health and well-being that we see rising throughout the community, as well as training our personnel so they can recognize issues before they become crisis mode. So the other areas that we talked about, the mid-year update related to revenue seemed to be on track. One of the interesting things that was talked about, and Mo, you had pointed out in our article in the Globe about recycling, that Shrewsbury, because we had utilized a different vendor, that our recycling fees were less, and a lot of communities were facing significant expenses now with recycling. I think that's something I briefly talked about too, that the article that you had seen in the Globe and pointed out to us.
Yeah, John, I mean, I think that's a point that needs to be explored a little bit, the whole concept of what do we call it, dual stream, as opposed to everything goes in the same
Single
bin.
stream.
Single stream, because that's a big cost saver for us. And I know a lot of people express frustration, or why can't we have toters? First of all, if you have a big toter, it's almost encouraging you to fill the toter up, because you've paid for that in some way, shape, or form, and you have that capacity to use. If you do it by the bag and it's a smaller unit, people will make some decisions, but that's with the trash. But at the recycling end, we can move that material much better with the dual stream.
Right.
And so I thought we heard some numbers, or perhaps it was in that article, and numbers that we heard. Some towns are paying more than $90
yeah,
a ton now,
Most
95.
towns
and
are
we're in
paying,
the thirties?
the single stream towns in particular are paying $95 a ton.
I thought we were about 53.
No, we're down between 25 and 35.
Okay.
It depends on how clean
Okay.
the stream is, but that was a big win for us, because some towns had to pay some amount in the past. We didn't, and partly because for a long time the recycling market was good, particularly cardboard and stuff like that. It's not anymore, and we were able to negotiate a contract separately from the trash hauler, which actually was recommended by the trash hauler, by Waste Management, that, you know, there might be an opportunity to go directly to the recycler, and we did, and it saved a lot of money. We're paying more now because we didn't have to pay anything before, but we're paying significantly less than we would have paid. A big number. It was like probably saving $60 a ton.
But that's why all the effort was made when we switched to trash haulers, to really explain to people what is and isn't recyclable. It's not that we're making this decision as a town or our trash haulers making that decision. It's what there's a market for, and,
Right.
and what the recycling companies can then turn around and sell. Otherwise it just sits. Or I think I was reading an article where, you know, China's sending it all back to Malaysia, and they're sending it back to us because they don't want our contaminated recycling. And I think we're getting, you know, quite a bit coming back to this country. It's a global problem. It's not just a Shrewsbury
Oh,
problem.
it is a global problem. I mean, so we were sending some stuff to India. India's cutting back on it. I think some other countries on the Pacific Rim were taking it, and they're being very selective on it. So it's difficult. But
The article you sent even talked about, what was it, Westfield? I think they featured the
Yes.
city
Right.
of Westfield having to make a decision about whether or not to even offer
Right.
curbside recycling anymore to their residents because it's becoming so expensive.
right, and it might end up all in the trash.
Right.
So either way, but it's a problem. Maybe, you know, it's one of those things where a long time ago we didn't even think of it. Somebody came and picked up the trash, went to the dump, and they covered it. It's not the same anymore.
Right.
I mean, and it shouldn't be. It's an improvement, but it is not a problem that's going to go away. That's for sure.
You're right.
So, anyways.
Well, it was a good decision.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point about the what you could recycle, some of those rules were there for 15 or 20 years, but because the recycling market was such that it was, the hauler didn't have to be as particular because they would take it. When the recycling centers got caught that they couldn't send the stuff out, they started enforcing their contracts, which they didn't enforce. So it drove the cost back to the haulers, and it was just a cycle. And the state changed a few times what you could recycle, what you couldn't recycle. So a lot of people thought that was because of the change in vendors, and it had nothing to do with the change in vendors. It was almost all of it was with the regulations and the costs that were being incurred. So the rules had to be enforced more.
Right. Plus our recycling gets sorted at the recycling plant,
Right.
and things that are wishfully recycled get taken out, and we get charged for them as trash.
Yep.
So,
Wishfully recycled?
wishfully recycled. I call that at home when people throw things, my family members will throw things in the recycling. I said, that's wishful recycling. That is not recyclable. That is trash. And I have to go through and sort it.
Yep.
So the other thing that we had talked about in addition to the mid-year update was the budget workshop, and some of the information that was presented to us, at least in terms of additional revenue and expenses that we were looking at. And one of the takeaway messages that I heard was that with roughly about $2.5 million of additional revenue, when you take away expected insurance expenses, that leaves a much smaller piece of the pie to cover all the various departments in the town. So that's something that we've seen in the past, that I know when I was with the school committee, we saw it with the schools. I know that you've been wrestling with that for many years, that we'll have a lot of continuing areas that require additional services with a fixed amount of resources, and that's an ongoing challenge that we're gonna have, especially during this budget cycle.
Right, and then after the budget workshop, just today, the governor released his budget. We received an email, I think it was just this afternoon, from Representative Kane, expressing anticipated state aid, and, I mean, I think incremental's a fair word of increase. I mean, nothing dramatic. Certainly fortunate, I mean, no decrease, it's rarely that, but we're not gonna save services to any great extent because of this great influx of new state aid.
They didn't break it down by town, did they? I didn't have a
Yeah.
chance to read it yet. They
She-
did?
She sent us some numbers, and there's a link
Oh.
to a preliminary cherry sheet.
That's why with,
I didn't have a chance to read it.
yeah, with ed reform, I mean, even with the adjustments that they made
Right, we're
with
going to $30 a student.
for minimum state aid, but
Right.
Shrewsbury has done historically much better than other communities. So we were held harmless during the tough years when they were looking through our target and required local contributions, and we were held harmless. But as the state has inched us more towards what we are expected to contribute, we're gonna get that minimum state aid, even with ed reform, part two, that the out-of-district transportation, at least the first time that literature came out, at best it'd be a phase-in for Shrewsbury. I didn't see it as an immediate cure-all for additional amounts for out-of-district transportation, which is not covered by the circuit breaker. So that's not an immediate relief for us, even though it's a good news story for the Commonwealth. Shrewsbury has already done very well under that.
So it's early on now, and things can change, but right now, I would think it's shaping up very similar to the recent budget cycles that we've had. Not quite enough new money to absorb everything. We're gonna have to look in how we're going to handle this budget like we look every year. Not dramatic cuts, but we're not gonna be able to do everything we wanna do.
No, but it's been, I remember when Dan Magato came, he said the first couple of years that he was here were the first really tough years that we had in a while, and he said I walked into a period basically of no growth in revenue, and the budget since then, except for a few years, they're always tight. When you're so tied into residential development, which it is what it is now. I mean, we're only gonna get so much more commercial, but when you're tied into it, you know, and you're not getting a lot of, we're not even getting a lot of new home construction now, which is kind of a good thing, but when you were getting 200 or 300 houses a year, that tax revenue was coming in.
Right, it was short-term benefit,
Right,
long-term.
pain.
Expense.
But we do have Market Basket that was recently approved. Their plan was recently approved by the planning board, and they're expecting to break ground maybe towards the end of the summer in September. So we know we have that project coming on, but again, it'll be a big number from the fees for the building permits, which is a one-shot deal, and then when it's built out, we'll get some tax money. But it's still, in the overall scheme of things, we're around 160 million total or something like that now. It's incremental compared to the size of the budget.
Right, and even revenue from marijuana shops, when they do open, isn't going to be enough to offset the costs and the deficit between what we want to do and what we can do.
No, but
It's something.
That's right.
It's something, and I would like to see them open, and I think we're getting close on the one on Route 20.
I thought it was supposed to open February 1st, but it is supposed to open in February.
as a
but
medical.
first.
Only as medical first.
And then I think May or June
Yeah.
is the hope, or their plan, I shouldn't say hope, their plan
They
to,
want
Convert
to
to
ease into
recreation.
it. And the second one, supposedly they're ready to pull their building permit, so,
On Route
and
9.
they got their provisional license, so but that's still a ways off. It's not, certainly in this budget cycle, we can't include any of that potential revenue because we have no idea what's gonna happen.
Because it's all regulated by the CCC. We're waiting on them. It's not like they're waiting on
Right.
us.
Right,
And it will be interesting to see how the revenue ultimately shakes out anyways with the saturation of more marijuana facilities throughout. It's not like we're Leicester and we're the first one to market and everyone's rushing over to their
And that's just as well.
Right.
That was kind
exactly.
of our plan, though, when you think about the way that we rolled this out as a town meeting, you know, making the decision to go ahead and have the two, and no one was in a real hurry to be first.
Right, and the important part of that is that the town manager is taking a conservative approach not to expect that revenue to come in anytime soon, at least in '21, so that's important. But in terms of what we're seeing as a challenge, the challenge isn't gonna go away. It's been here for a long time. As needs change, we'll see with the needs assessment for the senior community with up to 8,500 seniors in town, what results that will yield. We see with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, the town's needs continue to grow, and that's across our community, that the needs continue to grow and outpace the revenue that we can raise. So those will be sort of long-term vision ultimately to see what our priorities are and what citizens expect from their government. We provide a great level of service for a great value for our community, but as we see every year, that line or in a collision course, there's only so many things you can do with the revenue that you have.
Right, because we are restrained by Prop 2.5, and our costs keep rising. And when you look at this, you know, the capital improvement plan, these are not things that are like wants. They're needs. They're things that need to be done as far as replacing vehicles and making sure that. I think we're working on replacing a radio for the police and fire, so they're communicating on the front lines well, and it's not a wants budget at all.
That radio system, when they get it fully designed and we have to implement it, it's expensive. It's definitely needed.
Necessary.
Oh, we've had issues for years.
Yep. That's a public safety issue, and it's the public safety personnel issue on top of it, because they need to be able to communicate, particularly the police, if they're on a call, if they're in a place that's difficult to communicate. I mean, it's problematic. I mean, it's a serious problem, and they've been working on that for years to try to come up with the right solution.
So we're under 2 minutes before we have to wrap up. Any final parting thoughts?
Well, I know some people at this table would feel uncomfortable saying it, so I'll say it. It's election season has begun. Papers are available at the town clerk's office for a variety of townwide and precinct for town meeting. So people should be mindful of that, and if they want to get involved, they should check out the town clerk's website or visit the town clerk's office to see what's coming up in the May election.
Good PSA?
Yep.
Anything else? All right, so we'll sign off. Please tune in again next time for another Selectmen's Roundtable. Good night.